The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'm the host of the webinar. My name is Karen Mann, and I have my team with me, Brooks, our chair, and also Sidita Hasi, who is my co-chair partner in the webinars, but she's also hosting and the speaker of the day. We represent the Human Development and Leadership Division of the American Society of Quality. This is a global division aiming to enrich the personal and professional lives of our members and non-members, the global community, to trump over current and future challenges. We continuously look for new speakers within the range of our body of knowledge, which can be found in our website. We host monthly webinars. If you are interested or know someone interested, would be happy to review their application. The Book of Knowledge can be found on our website, www.asqhdnl.org. Link is shared on the chat on the right-hand side. Before we begin the webinar, let me go over the housekeeping and some webinar rules. If there is any question, please type under question sections and we will answer the questions. Webinar will be held for 45 minutes and then QA in 15 minutes. If you want to continuously education credit 0.1 CEU, you have to be on the webinar for at least 40 minutes. You will receive a dedicated email from us, which you can save as PDF and send it to ASQ to claim your credit. Now, let me introduce you to the speaker of the day, Sidita Hasi. Sidita grew up in Albania. After the fall of Albania's communism, she moved out of the country, as did most of her generation. She spent 10 years in Italy studying financial intermediaries and working in the banking industry. When in Italy, she authorized Albanian banking system book in Italian, where she analyzed the impact the transition from communism to democracy had on the Albanian social economic system. When the global economic crisis hit in 2008, Sidita decided to pursue her next educational step and moved to Spokane, WA for her MBA, MA Masters, Organizational Leadership Studies, while she worked as a research and a teaching assistant in operations management, statistics, and organizational development, as well as represented the graduate community as president of Graduate Student Association. During her graduate studies, Sidita was awarded for academic research contribution. She co-published at Mediterranean Journal of Social Sciences as well as presented at the Decision Science Institute International Conference in Boston in the operations track. This led her to move to Boston for her operational excellence role, leading process improvements, project management, and employee coaching on quality tools across USA, Canada, and Latin America operations. Sidita was recognized for a Bravo Zulo Award for exhibiting above and beyond explanatory performance. Sidita enjoys stretching her skills through MIT Executive Education in Management and Leadership, along with Boston College MBA courses, which led her to today's topic as independent research study. Her research interest is on how organizational design and executive leadership can increase employee productivity, empowerment, and happiness, leading to customer satisfaction. Sidita is an ASQ certified Six Sigma Green Belt and currently preparing for Black Belt as well as PMP. In the Boston community, Sidita serves as the ASQ Boston Program and Marketing Chair as well as Boston CCN 2019 Annual Quality Conference Co-Chair. Sidita also serves as a webinar co-chair for ASQ Human Development and Leadership. She is very passionate about kids, friends, astronomy, religion, community development, music, storytelling through photography and video, and writing about everything human. This being said, Sidita has few addictions she can't get rid of. She's obsessed with her family in Albania and brainy books, her mom's cooking, Flamenco Beach, camping in Colorado Island off Puerto Rico, and her beloved Europe. Her secret dream, having a lifelong enough to learn as much as possible, give back the impossible, and make worthwhile that day she left home 18 years ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, Sidita Hasi taking over the webinar.
Thanks, Kiran. And we hope to represent that description well. So I'm very glad that we have a full house today. We have about 100 people. And we apologize to the ones who couldn't log in. We'll have a recording coming out in a few days, hopefully this week as well. So as you mentioned, the topic itself is kind of a journey for me, but I think it's very critical and doesn't matter to what role we're at. And I still see the same failures. And I wanted to make sure this is a presentation I've already done through our annual quality conference in Boston. But because we don't have a way to do this in a more interactive way in 2 ways, I would invite everybody who has questions during the time to use the question box, not the chat one, and write those thoughts out, even if that's not a question or you have a comment, something that you want to share with other people, please do so. As I mentioned before, it's not just about my learning or my research. This is about learning from each other, and that's why you see a very detailed life social story in there, because I want everybody, if they have to remember something from it, that we are all humans after all. So we all have some strengths, some weaknesses that we can learn from, and we learn by sharing. So please do use the question box as many times as you need. So what I would ask everyone about, which was actually impacting me when I started reading through this research, there was a couple, about 100 research references I was referring to, and what hit me the most was a study that was done from Harvard Business Journal, and they basically questioned about 400 executives, and the responses they got when it comes to failure, execution ranked #1. And that kind of was enough for me to say, okay, this is a topic I want to go further and explore. So that was kind of impressive. The same people, so same executives asked, 80% of them, they did acknowledge that they do have a management system, which is formal one in their organization, but only 80% of those who declared they have one believe that that system basically works well all the time or most of the time. Now, let's think of the ones who weren't even aware of having a good management system there, so that number might be even higher. So that's kind of concerning to me, even though it might make me smile for a second. But this was said from executives. Now, let's imagine what other people in that company think. So it is a bit scary. So what I would like to start with, instead of starting what pushed me towards this project, I would like to understand what are the pain points that the audience is feeling. So think of your team. It can be a project implementation, a strategy implementation, a teamwork. What is your top one struggle that you are facing or your team is facing that you would hope to hear a bit more about? Is it, and you can have a poll with this one, Kiran, is it the lack of motivation, procrastination, multitasking? It's broken because you're asked to do so many things at once. We live in a vivid world. Delegation might be an issue. Some people might have a hard time with that. The communication is broken. Is it delivering on time with so many things to do? Is there any other issue or struggling moments you're having? And you can, I think, opening the poll, yes.
I'm opening the poll now.
I know there might be more than one, but try to think of your key pain point, so we can see how our struggles being shared among this group. I hope you have none. So I can go back to my mom's cooking, which is home today. So. Okay. All right.
I'm going to wait a few more seconds because I can see everybody's still working their way through it.
And if you have other, you can also use the question box as a comment, so we can maybe later on discuss a little bit of other pain points that you might have.
That's a very good response. I'm just going to give 10 more seconds.
Personally, I deal with all of them, so I haven't had a hard time looking at those.
So I'm closing the poll now. So Sidita, the result is 19% for lack of motivation, 38% for multitasking challenges, and 32% for unclear communication, and 4% for delivery on time, and 8 is others.
Okay.
So
the ones who are only 4% delivery on time, they might have a call with me, so they teach me how to deliver on time so many things. But again, I did expect this sort of equal distribution, especially among top 3. As mentioned before, these are struggles that if anybody is working on a project or on a team, it's or even like in their own task, it's definitely something that they can struggle with. So we will try to cover these, but the point, as you'll see, it's not just having one golden rule. And that's what I make sure that we understand from this webinar today. So what brought me here about the project failure study itself is from the bio. So I moved a couple of different places and different experiences. In Albania, I would say just a couple of funny examples here, but during communism, when we think about management, how you manage a project or how you manage a team, during communism was not really any flat sort of organization that you can see nowadays even more and more since they start building in the DNA of the organizational structure. It was really like, this is what you have to do it by this day, and was kind of, you did it, you didn't do it. So that's what I got until I got about 18 years old there. Moved to Italy during studies and working to a corporate commercial banking. A lot of hierarchy, even though it was easy for me from an emotional perspective. I could understand, you see the different colors of faces in there. The culture was different, like very straightforward. So I could understand when something is going well, something is not going well, which I didn't experience when I moved to US. But in terms of hierarchy, it was pretty high level of vertical hierarchy. During studies, and I was working in a restaurant, and what hit me the most there was I was doing everything on time, doing well, performing. So this concept of when we work on projects, we perform and we have to deliver. The soft skills, though, was something that, even though I was very passionate about leadership, but didn't really consider or knew anything about it as a profession itself, was not something we spoke a lot about, even during studies there, and the way the education system is designed. So when the chief of the waiters there were telling me, Sidita, you have to smile. I'm like, really? I'm not here for my smiles. I'm here to deliver to the customer. So this whole concept of how we are built on the environment where we're raised, it's also impacting. So when you work with people, try to see where they're coming from. And I'm going to talk about just countries and the background, the ethnic background here, but what sort of environmental culture they have been growing that experience. Moving back to US for my studies, another lack of planning there was when I thought that Gonzaga University is in Washington, DC instead of Washington State. What happened? I didn't plan enough. I wasn't, I was so into the passion of getting things done and maybe trying to meet that deadline of the application. I didn't really search. Like, think at that time there was not much internet use, so don't like question here how come you didn't know. But the point is that we didn't do enough of planning. So the planning part, it is key. So I ended up in Washington State, very happy later, but initially I wasn't very happy because I discovered it's not that close to where I wanted to be. Another thing which was a failure was delegation. We had some friends just driving around, going from Spokane to Vegas without delegating the driving at all, and we had a car accident. So there are things that even might be smiling this moment, but when you think about it from a project management perspective, they could be easily avoidable. Now, in the corporate world, might not be that easy. Like when I moved to Boston, I was working, and I still work in a big company with about 300,000 people around the world. And now imagine all those different things impacting one another. What impact would they have in the final project delivery? I went to MIT and taking some of those executive classes where I was a baby and everybody else was either a CEO, a VP, that kind of students they have around there. We had some executives using storytelling. We had some executives where they're crying as they share their like personal stories. And from then, I was like, when I go back to work, I can't see a person as a title. I can see a person as a human. And I think even though it might be very generalistic as an idea, when it comes to bringing all those skills together when you work on projects, they do have a big impact. So it is very important that we step back and instead of saying, why is my project failing, just like so narrow on the scope of project implementation, take a look back and then think of the bigger perspective and look at the big picture. So my passion about learning and teaching around there, it started with ASU Boston, and I got involved through the Six Sigma Green Belt. And I thought, since like everybody says, well, I'm not so happy at work, but if we do something we love, maybe everything should work well, right? And these are my friends now, which were, we actually were here in 2018 in March for our annual conference. And you see us like so happy, we're so energetic, so passionate about the conference. It took a year to put it together. There were a lot of failures that no one could even notice afterwards. But when we did lessons learned session, there was so much that we could have done better. And we do this conference every year. And the question is, if we do the same project over and over, how come we don't learn? Or it might be a different mistake, but so these failures do happen quite often. So for today, we'll try to go a little bit over what's out there, how other people are doing it, how are schools teaching project implementation, execution, how these executives who write books, what are they saying? So what I did is I looked into about 100 resources I said, and then so some of the models, some have these perfect 3 golden rules, tips, and things like that. I'm not such a big fan of those, but I did look into what are our business schools teaching. So what is really going on? And I'm not sure if that's so inclusive, but at the same time, it is quite broad. And I'm not going to go over the boring research explanation there, but just to get some practical implications that can have us as either people who work in projects I mentioned before, or a strategy or a team as well. And some quick take-home exercise you can start playing with, since we can do it interactive way here. So from a research perspective, to make it easy on you and not go around 100 resources there, what you see in blue, let's talk in colors. What you see in blue is basically academic research. So academic journals that I read about implementation were mainly descriptive in nature. So they're not normative, which means that they don't say this is how you should do it. This is kind of research done. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's more like descriptive in nature. And where they fall between is between content and process. What does it mean? The process area there is telling you this is the process 1, 2, 3, like the make sort of thing. So it's a process with steps you have to follow. If you follow these, this is the success you'll achieve. From a content perspective, it's more kind of principles. These are the principles. These are the values. You have to lead properly. You have to build the culture. So it's more kind of the soft skill side of the project management. Whereas everything else that I was reading, and in red there, it's a couple of books, everything else that I was reading kind of fell into, this is how you should do it. Top 10 tips, so I'm the executive, during my experience, this happened, this is what you should do. And some of the videos, some of the big consultancy firms, that's where they fall between normative, this is how you should do it. But what impressed me a little bit was more on the content, soft skills side of the project management and implementation. I do have the models that are behind, so if somebody is curious about those and want to go a little bit more in detail, they can reach out to us and we can share those models, and that's not a problem. But the point here is, now with all these modules, I was so happy. I'm like, hey, here's a model, here's another one. Which one do I use now? Like, everybody claims its own is the best. So what I want you to get from here is, I don't think there is a perfect one. It really depends on the situation that you are, the context. So the context can be the organizational structure you have, can be the strategy you're trying to implement, by when do you need to implement it, how is the culture of the organization, but also how is the culture of the people you are working with, or the culture of the team. Sometimes we work in this little silos. It might be good to like have a cohesive team within the team itself, but might not be that good if you are trying to have a multi sort of departmental team. So try to see what works for you. Here's like where those modules kind of fall, though. I did some sort of comparison if there is any overlapping between those. This is just a radar, so don't try to understand the picture itself. But what I want to point out is about 25% of those modules were process modules. So this is step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on. The other 21% were options. Options means when you're planning and then trying to implement, but in the planning phase, you do have to think of different options for implementing. Why? Because we live in this continuous change, right? We can't just think of we're planning, we're done with planning, we're moving to implementation, and the planning part just stays like that. No, because in the implementation phase, you'll also have to reevaluate the context, reevaluate if the strategy changed or the scope changed, or you had people changing in the team. So whatever change is impacting you to review that implementation plan, you do need to have some other options. So you have them ready. And by having them ready, I mean you are prepared for it. The other 21% is just the concept of break down the silos, so look at everything as a network, the system thinking sort of mindset. Everything is interconnected. So if you are working on your own team, but you do know that another stakeholder, which can be an external team member from another department or a customer, whatever that is, internal or external customer, you do have to either involve them or communicate with them, but look at the net from everything you're doing from a network perspective. Where are these linkages? And this needs to be done all the way to the implementation phase. But as you move in the execution, because that's the whole topic here, it's not just like how to plan, but how to implement. As you move to implementation, make sure if there is any change towards that network that you already had initially reviewed. The value and principle aspect of it, it's what I talked about content before, so 13%. There it's more about what are the values of my organization. If you are an executive, let's say, and you want to make sure that you build a culture towards sticking and you exemplify those values as well. And same thing with principles. What are the principles that you live for? And do those match with the people that are working with you in that specific team or task? Deliberation, it's my favorite, even though it runs low there as a representation in these modules. It's change management. Are we managing change? Like we plan for change, but are we managing the change itself? Like getting people ready to accept the change. We hear a lot about people resist change, people don't like change. Do we have a plan for it, how to manage that? Or we just say, this is the plan for this project, this is what we're going to do. No, you do this, you do that. Like who's managing this change resistance towards people that have to be involved and have to participate? And we'll talk about how to do that. Tool-based is just tool specific. It can be A3 format for those who are familiar with that. Balance scorecard, like sort of a page there that says this is our goal, this is where we stand, this is what's working, not working, this is the team and the progress. So as you see, there is some distribution in there. That's why I don't think there is the perfect model. But what I would hope to do today is kind of reflect. Let's do a self-reflection, like pick one big issue, as we had the poll before, that you struggle with, or a project that's important to you, or a task, if it's personal life or just work-based, and see, do these questions trigger something in you that you might do differently, or people around you can help you achieve that. So the first question I would invite you to ask, and myself as well, is what is the problem you're trying to solve? Might sound very basic. This is actually something that I heard from this MIT professor who was former VP of Harley Davidson, Don Kiefer. He was trained from the Japanese gurus, and he was making fun of this question as well, because that's what one of the Japanese coaches was telling him. What is the problem you're trying to solve? When they went to Harley Davidson factories there. And he was like, yeah, but we have these people around the factories. They are not working well, so let's fix this. But yeah, but what exactly? Why are you trying to solve something? What is the big issue? Try to ask that question with the projects you are either being tasked or you are trying to develop a project from scratch. Ask what exactly and why do we need to ask this question? So you understand the why, so your team understands the why, so you can stay on scope. So every time you start implementing, that's where the whole party goes on, like for getting out of control and the mess starts. So when you are in that mess, go back to this question. What exactly was I was trying to solve? And does that still stand true to my new situation? Or let's say the company changed strategy or whatever it is, but that you have to be aligned. Does that still hold true there? The other thing that I would want to point out, which is actually the colleague of Don Kiefer, Nelson Reppening, the other professor at MIT, he talks about performance gets bad before it gets better. So in the implementation phase, it is easy to start. I mean, easy. Like for people who like organizing and like planning a lot, it is very easy for me to plan. I can plan in detail so well, so I can feel like I planned everything perfectly. There's no way this project is gonna fail. And then the project starts, and bam, that's where everything starts falling, and it's not how it should be. And that might freak me out. And the point that Nelson here is saying is about it is okay initially to see a performance going down. You might have people who still need to be onboarded, people resistant to change, people who are being trained. Whatever those struggles, or if we're changing strategy and structure, like a capability alignment, there is things happening. That's where the project itself is taking life. So that is okay. Still, you need to keep an eye on how much time it is okay. So you need to know when or what will trigger a success definition and when to look for it. But at the beginning, it is okay. And that's my nephew, which kind of makes me learn a lot. My sister was going through a tough day at her university and teaching and stuff, so she was coming back, and he insisted, I want to go to the party with my friends, I want to go to the party, and she's like, I don't have time, it started raining, the car broke down, so she was going all over, and she's a social psychologist, so she's supposed to be the nice and then calm one, right? So she sees her mom all frustrated, and he insists, like his goal is still, he wants to go to the party with his friend. He just sits down and starts taking this yoga pose. He never did yoga, or my sister never did yoga, and I guess he's just seen on TV. And he sits and says, how about we stop for a moment? Just let's stop, let's review the whole day, it's gonna get better. So this moment kind of made me think, in those days where we have this project working on, do we ever, as I said before, take a step back? Do we reevaluate the situation and reprioritize maybe tasks that we have to do? And in this situation, I had a moment where I had multiple projects being requested from different sponsors, and we might run into that, especially if you work with projects. You might not work for the same manager only. You might have multiple managers asking you to work on projects. And I had to go back and say, hey guys, to both of the managers and say, you both sent me a project request. This is what it takes to get this one. This is what it takes to get this one done. Now you, among yourself, have to deal with one another and let me know which one do you want me to prioritize. When I put it into them to make that decision, and not just me complaining about, oh, I'm so busy, I'm overloaded, things like that, actually, no one took it personally. They discussed, they said, okay, I can wait another week, I can't. The other one said, please go ahead with mine, but at least both were in agreement. It was just one question, which I didn't even know that I was thinking properly to do that. It took some daring because it was high-level executive, but at the same time, it did solve a lot of struggling in terms of time that I was going through. One thing that I want you to remember as well that comes out of this research when you saw so much research on content base is lead as a middle manager. It doesn't matter if you are the leader of the project or of the team, if you are the manager or not, if you are just a person who is executing, you still have to think and build a mindset to be the middleman. The middleman, and that's my role at my company. It is very tough. I like it because I can solve many things. At the same time, it is very frustrating because there is always a gap between who plans or who asks for a project or executive level and who's actually the end user, the person who's actually doing the job or executing, and who is close to the customer. And there is this big gap. I'm not saying it's a failure, it might be a time related issue that they can't talk to one another. But if you notice something, that there is a broken link between these two parties, act like that middle link. In terms of planning, start planning by having consensus from the end users. Always involve them since the beginning of the project and not all the way to the end. It helps you get buy-in. It helps you understand, would they really do it? Because it's not about just like it's their job. No, they have to really commit to it. They have to see that it's aligned to their job. It's aligned to the organizational structure or goal that you have. And also you get the buy-in and you understand how each person functions. Each person is motivated differently. So if you include them since the beginning, you can understand how they get motivated. Maybe you have a team member who's more into organizing. Put that person into that aspect of the project. Another person might be just want to stay kind of locked by himself. Put them into data. So try to understand the end users. And also, those are the people who are actually closest to the customer, and they can help you get the more innovative and the more appropriate solutions as well. When it comes to middle management, another key aspect that is important here that you can achieve is at the very beginning, it is okay to, and you should treat everybody equally. So when you think of stakeholders, get them informed, keep everybody informed the same way. That's the concept that these researchers were talking about, equality. You have to build this sense of equality that's going into this theme. The culture that is built and they perceive is equality. However, as you move towards execution, you do need to differentiate, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not treating everybody equally, and that's where the sense of equity comes on hand here. So equity is about, let's say, it's a system change, engineering. It's a project that will take some system changes. It is okay to have a separate call, and you don't need to have all this big team calls where you waste each other's time to just engineering and maybe delegate more things because they are the process owners. It doesn't mean that the other people are less important, but at the same time, you are building a sense of equity. The other aspect is training. We build this training program, so we think we're working projects. Part of the implementation plan is also to build a training plan. And they launch class, that's it. Can we have always the same standard training? No. Not everybody needs to be trained the same way. It might be a formal or informal training, but you have to treat people differently because they are different. So if you have somebody who is unskilled, just started working on that project or just started working for the company, you need it different. So you need a more detailed, directed sort of training. Whereas another person who might be more skilled in that specific task, let them free, delegate more, let them make the decisions. And they will appreciate that because it fits with what they want as well. Another question I have here, and some of you might have seen it already, but before we start the poll, I want you to, for a second, to look at it and see what do you see. And I've gone through it myself, and even if you saw it before, that's okay. Try to think of what you saw the first time you saw it, not the second time. Okay, and Kieran, can you start the poll now?
Yeah.
On the poll, you'll have a couple of answers.
Yeah, so the poll is open now. What do you see? Select one, the old woman or a young woman.
So an old woman, I think you have 3 answers, right?
Yeah, and the third one is that in case you thought of something else and now you're changing your mind
Yes.
after you see the options.
So if you first time you saw an old woman, a young woman, or if you the second time you see it, did you change your mind because you were given the answers there? And this is just to get an idea. We don't need to have everybody respond. This kind of a thinking moment there. Once you have a chance, Karen, you can close it.
Yeah. I can still see people answering the poll, so we'll wait a few more seconds.
And we'll try to use the time for question and answers as well. But let's just look into what the first thing that they felt.
Yeah. So
Okay.
5 seconds, and I'm closing the poll. Okay, so closing it now.
And the truth is?
It says old woman 31%, young woman 44%, and I changed my mind after seeing the options as 25. So most of the people saw young, followed by old
young
woman.
Okay, we will have to ask why do we see how young they are, but we're making fun of this question as well during conference.
I probably still need a different set of eyes because I couldn't find a young woman in it.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, I saw the young. I couldn't see the old woman in it. But the point here is, and I'm glad there is some percentage there, about 25%, that did change their mind, because the initial key point is, yes, people think differently, see things differently. So it's very important when we transmit and communicate with them that we actually understand and what they are perceiving. And we also ask them to rephrase what we ask them to do, or we ask them, this is what I'm trying to transmit through this project as delegation. Did you understand it like how I'm thinking, or can you rephrase it for me? That rephrasing will help you understand, did they actually understand what you're trying to transmit? So that's very important instead of just delegating, done. But another key point here that research was showing, which was interesting, is the sense giving and the sense making. It's not the same. So you might think that, as I said, by delegating, you are giving some sense to this is a task that you have to perform. But sense making, it's what the other person is getting, and it really depends on how much important it is for you that the other person you're working with has to actually have the same understanding. And what you can do to give sense, or sense giving, as I mentioned, one, you can ask them to rephrase, or you have to exemplify. You have to use symbols in the company. You might have symbols in your company that are trying to give some sense to you. What about maybe the culture? So think of those notes that you see around the company. So those are all designed in purpose to give that sense. Another key aspect, since we're talking about perception here, and this was quite funny to see since I'm a shopaholic person, is so the people you're working with, of course, they are motivated differently, and you might have some people who are into rewarding or recognition. We'll talk about that in the difference between the two. But what triggers them more, it's not just the fact that they had received a reward in the past, but the fact that there is a linkage between their performance and a rewarding system. So think of going to, I don't want to mention the store, but I go to a store that I like, and I would go back, not because I had a reward and I was so happy 2 weeks ago. I would go back because I know if I go, and I go often, then I will get a reward. So there is that linkage that I perceive, that if I go often, I will get a reward. Not the fact that I got a reward 2 weeks ago, I was happy 2 weeks ago, so let me go there and show them I'm happy. So make sure that the team, or depending on the role, because sometimes you might not be the one who can design this motivational system, but make sure the people who are leading understand that as well, that there is this linkage between your performance that will motivate you to perform better. Another key aspect, many of you might be familiar or many might not be, but I'm obsessed with Simon Sinek, who keeps asking, ask why, start with why. And what happens in the planning phase, you might have the why, the how, and the what, which is perfect. And but here today, we're not talking just about the planning, but we're talking about the execution, why that planning might fail. So in terms of we're planning, ask why, and explain that why to your stakeholders, the team or the stakeholders that will get impacted. It can be internal, like directed stakeholders, which means that they're part of the team, or it might be indirect stakeholders. They are not part of the team, but they will be impacted. So it's important you include them and explain why this, what you're working on, it's important. Be informal. As I said, we're all human, so I'm personally putting my whole life here very open. And at the same time, it's about how to do it. It's not about just delegating. You still, even if you don't have a company and we don't officially have a PMO office, still somebody needs to act like that middle person that keeps everybody on track and then explains during those meetings that we have. We don't just like fly around, brainstorm, but also come back with some action items, timeline, and follow up on those. Decision rights is very important. You might delegate tasks to people, but do they have decision rights to make a decision? I was given many times tasks that, oh, Sidita, you're good at this, go to people, blah, blah. But then I couldn't make the decision. I could say, I noticed this and that, but I didn't have the authority. Initially, I was just an analyst. People will see me, the analyst. Who's she to come to engineering, make us change things? It's just the analyst. I didn't have the authority. So it's important when you delegate something, make sure that they have the decision rights. Another thing which is important to mention is the measurement itself. You're running these reports. Are you measuring performance against these people who are actually accountable for that task, or just measuring out of measure and saying this office is doing great, this other office is not doing great? You might have offices supporting one another. Are you showing that accountability in the way you are measuring the success? And as I mentioned before, sense of urgency. You might have people coming to you who they always want something as of yesterday. Well, wait a minute, because you're coming to me every time as I wanted that yesterday, then that's not urgent anymore, because everything to you seems to be urgent. Of course, there might be a situation like that, but we do need to prioritize, but include those people as well, so they understand what's on your table as well if you're struggling with it. And in the what part, is it clear? We talked about communication. Deliverable, it's a very important aspect. We talk about project and delivering, but I don't think we spend a lot of meetings talking about what is the actual deliverable instead of just decision making. I had during the conference, Robin Lawton, I believe his name is a consultant, and his whole work is based on see everything as deliverable. It can be a report, it can be information, whatever it is. Don't think of process just as this team, that team. What is actually being delivered? So make it as tangible as possible, and again, define success. But define the success since you are at the planning phase, in the implementation planning phase. So you know, once you have launched and you are evaluating the success, you know what success should be looking like. You don't just launch and wait, this looks good. You have to have a clear understanding that is within scope. And the scope, as I mentioned before, is then all the way at the beginning, and the why part is a big component there. But the point I want to make here is kind of a revised model of Simon Sinek that says why, how, and what. During the whole project execution, you have to make sure that these are aligned, because some of these components might change during the project. You have to make sure that they stick together and they're aligned. The structure, we mentioned that people are interconnected, so think from a system perspective and look at everything as a network and see which people need to be involved and communicated accordingly. Be open towards execution, to always be ready to go back. You might be in the evaluation phase, but doesn't necessarily, according to ASU, actually, you can go steps back. It can be in a build phase where you build a solution. It can be in assessing which opportunities to focus on, or even in launching planning itself. Maybe you didn't have a good implementation plan. So something is triggering that lack of success. And we mentioned capabilities, so you have to have aligned capabilities. You don't include, let's say, engineering. Once you already build a solution, you go to engineering and say, here, do it. Well, no, because they might not even have the time. It's important to include them since the beginning in the planning phase, so they also can plan accordingly. Don't like last minute you go there and you say, we need to change that. So everything together, keep everybody on the same page. And this is one of our key points here. We mentioned before change management. So there's a whole study about change management from Levin's phase of changes there. It's about making organization changeable, on your team flexible, and it's a continuous base, not a one-step transition or a couple of steps transition. It's a circle. So use advocates. We don't have leadership consultants all the time at work, but we do have people who are quality related people, and they act as change catalyzers, change management. You can be that person by how? We talk about indirect stakeholders. Go to the other department, get involved, let them know what's going on, ask for their feedback, ask for them to help you. People want to help. So it's different if you just delegate and say, here, do it. And it's different if you go to these people and say, I need your help. I know you have experience in this. Will you be able to share your thoughts with me? It's a different approach. It's the same result. It's a different approach. What you need in order to help you with the change management, always clear, accessible information. You might have clear information, but then you go to another project. Where is that information? Is it documented? Many times we don't document it. Like we don't have it stored somewhere that's accessible for other team members to use it, or other new project team members to use it that they can learn from instead of reinventing the wheel. The SMART goals there, always a key point, and always have to be aligned with the performance recognition, which many companies don't still have a good rewarding system, and once a year performance review, very defective. Servant leadership. You're there to serve. This whole servant leadership concept was my graduate philosophy school, and I love it. That time I didn't understand it, but I think it's very, very helpful, because you're about, if you think of your work as about helping people and them helping you, I think it will be a different approach. And that's what will help the motivation aspect as well. So we spoke about different people. Remember, they come from different backgrounds. Background is not just ethnicity. They come from different motivational senses that they have. And in order to work together, you need to build a relationship trust there, so they can come to you and collaborate with you. And what you do to help that create is you exemplifying the type of culture that you want to build, so we can get that collaborative culture and feedback. So the last thing here is about you identifying quick wins. Think of the problem you had initially that you are running and having struggles with. Try to see there is small quick wins that you can identify. So we spoke about take your title hats off. We're all human beings here, and I hope we can use the question and answer session to just really be free to share whatever worked for you as well. Keep alignment between anything that it has to do and it impacts your project, culture, strategy, anything else. The strategy implementation, it is a strategy itself. So when you're implementing, you're not just about launching the solution you had, you're about to plan for implementation. And we forget about the planning aspect of it for the implementation, not just the planning of a solution. No implementation plan might be the same, and it might be good for each project you are working on. So try to see those option models that were spoke about initially. Keep your implementation plan handy. As I said, you might have to change things. During evaluation phase, if something failed, how about you take, and I actually print out the implementation plan and say, we failed. Let's see first if we did what we were supposed to do. If we didn't, then, or maybe that plan needs to change. Maybe that plan is not good still. Lead the leader. The other thing that we, in leadership, I feel like we lack, it's always about this concept of leading people, managing people, how we lead. So we're always this leader. And we don't speak enough about when you're a follower, because you might say, well, my boss doesn't let me do that. Go talk to my boss and see how it works with him, this concept. You are also the leader of your own person. So don't see yourself as just a follower. You can go and ask. Maybe your boss had a bad day. So try to see them as human beings as well, and try to lead them as well in the way you want to be led from them. The culture of systems thinking, so everything is interconnected, always build this mentality of people noticing things to be done better and working on it and taking action. So the Kaizen sort of concept. Include end users, we mentioned this was key to the planning phase. Manage the change itself, so have a management system in place, and start with small bites. So what I would like you to do when you go home or work, whatever you feel like, find the person you trust, ask them if they can be there for you to just share something that you want to share. You're struggling with projects, and share an execution failure, and share why do you think it failed, and then re-say the story by asking yourself what you could have done better to prevent this failure, and allow them to basically give you feedback and see if you can find some quick small wins to start with. Now this is thank you thing, but I didn't hear anybody talk here, so it's kind of tough for me. I'm not used to one-way thing. So I hope we can use this time to share some of your thinking, any questions you might have.
Yeah, Sidita, this was really, really awesome. A lot of thoughts and questions that even went through my mind. So we'll wait while we're waiting for everybody to throw in some questions. Please feel free to write up your questions in the box. And meanwhile, one of the things that really resonated with me was about the structure. I'm always a fan of calling strategy and then aligning that with the structure, and in the absence of that, when we do come across hiccups and failures, when the strategy has been put in place and we focus a lot on implementation, and execution lags behind because the things and the structure was not aligned to it.
And the structure, it's kind of tricky because it might be easy to say, which I always say, the structure is not the right thing. And then I might say, Sidita, it takes a lot of time, so just move on, find a quick win. I'm like, no, you don't get it. We're going to have this issue repeating over and over, a rolling issue, if we don't fix the structure as well. Sometimes it's the culture. So it was this question in the research that do we start building the culture first according to the structure, or do we start like building a structure and then we align the culture? And the idea there is about stick to the DNA of what you're trying to do, like stay on scope, and everything else needs to be aligned around that.
Yeah.
And maybe I've had projects where I really was asking that we need to deliver. I'm like, okay, here's a quick win, but in the meantime, every feedback that I was getting from people that I was like stakeholders that were not maybe part of the team, I was like secretly hiding that, but putting it in a sort of little document that I had some big, longer projects to work on. But that feedback didn't get wasted. And people didn't feel like that their feedback was wasted, because I worked on quick, small wins, but also at the same time started building like a longer term solution.
Yeah. So one of the questions, Sidita, that's in play is from Miller is, do you have any golden tips for a virtual company which does not have a quality structure mentality?
Are we colleagues? Because I work in the golden word. I don't like the golden word, so that's not what I like. But I understand the point, because the golden rules, the golden tips, that were when I was going through research, those were things that anybody might claim this is the golden thing. So I wouldn't say so. But in virtual companies, and I don't have a team specific to my own team. I always work in cross-functional teams and virtually. So what is he struggling with? Is it communication? Is it what is the issue? And that goes back to ask yourself, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So in virtual teams, what is it lacking? Is it lacking the communication, or because it's hard when virtually leading a team, which happens to me as well. Sometimes I make the local team. Sometimes I have to work virtually, but there is a local team as well, and I tell them I ask and pretend that they have a local meeting, because I do understand the value of having a face-to-face meeting and getting things done. And then whatever they come up with, I do have those famous calls, webinar calls, and we discuss what we need to do.
So we have.
But I also, when I work on virtual teams, I make sure that I delegate this sort of P&P role, which I am doing in that team, also to somebody local. That once I transition and I'm done out of that, I'm basically out of that project, we do have a transition plan ready, so we can hand it to the process owners and to the stakeholders. So that success is sustainable, even though I might be virtually and then gone out of that team. And that's all part of the planning.
We're running out of time, and we have few questions. I'll have to kind of pick few quickly. Okay. How important is prioritizing when implementing a project, since companies always have limited amount of resources?
Prioritizing, it's important, but what's more important is refreshing that prioritizing. So it really depends on the context and how many projects they have. So I cannot say you have to prioritize every day or you have to prioritize every week. Depends on the context of that company or whatever life situation that is. It is important. It is, and you have a great webinar coming up next month on August 22nd, which I would like to remind for this. When you ask about is it important and does it matter basically, and is it actionable? Can I do something about it? So those are actually questions that I started asking myself, and it does help with prioritizing. As often, depends on the situation.
Question from Kelly. How would you handle being asked to lead a failing project when you're new to an organization? That's an interesting one.
I hit the wall many times, even if I'm not new to the organization. But trust me, in the long run, and how I ended up in this job is because I started asking those difficult questions to all high-level executives because I didn't see titles, I didn't see structure, I didn't see anything. To me, everything was, why are we doing this way? Why are we doing that way? The right people will take it positively. The wrong people will not, but you want to be with the right people. So if it's the wrong place, then in the long term, it's a benefit for you to get out of there.
Yeah.
But use it as a way to learn as well. So try to understand why do you keep insisting? Because if you're a new person, there's so much unwritten culture, and that's why I don't like changing companies very often or changing without knowing somebody who really will work internally. So it helps me understand the culture. You can understand it from a website. So try to use informal leadership. Talk to people who work there. If you feel not that daring, I'm very European, straightforward, I don't mind. But if you don't feel like that, use informal leadership. Use the horizontal team, and then try to understand from them as well why they keep doing things that way, and where is that you can have that impact. Maybe indirectly. I've always been an informal leader. I'm not a manager. And that might be surprising, but I'm not. And I think I've learned way more by not being one.
Thank you, Sidita. The next one is from Louis. What are the best strategies to bring people on board with different cultural backgrounds?
People. It's to me, they're all people. Share your story. What did you do last night? I purely, deeply care and authentically care. So when I ask them how you're doing, how is your family, like when is the last time you saw them, if they're coming from different countries, but I naturally care. So if you just do it because you have to build the relationship, might be okay if you do it one time, but people will sense your lack of authenticity. So if you want to be treated like somebody cares for you, why wouldn't you care for someone else? I think that's the way to break down this whole silo that we put ourselves, if it is organizational or cultural.
Okay.
There is a whole, actually on culture, there is a whole interesting book about choices. So you might want to email me. And there was this Indian, but grown up in US, and she talks about the art of choosing. Art of Choosing. That's the book.
Okay, one question from Piyush. How to align the perception of all the stakeholders when everyone has their own personal goals that is governing the perception?
That was where we talked about culture. So it is important to understand, when we talk about culture organization, this is the way we do it here. This is not just the way we do it here, because culture is made by people. So we don't think of culture as something so intangible. It is important that each individual culture might not meet at 100% with a shared culture, what we're trying to build, but it has to have some shared and common understanding. So let's brainstorm and see what brings you here. How do you see yourself being involved in this team, and what we're trying to achieve? You need to all together find the common ground. And again, talking. I mean, guys, how do kids do it, and how do they meet friends? It's just, I always learned, and during research, I was doing grad school, I was very intrigued by leadership in kids. There's so much to learn from them. They don't have all these complex things in their heads that I'm the manager, you're this, you're that, you're from here, I'm from there.
So this is an interesting one from Rahul.
And actually, on culture, I wanted to add one thing. On culture, I do go and share my thoughts, which people might find that's just so stupid. How do you dare? I just go to the CEO and share, you know what I think in this company? No. They're like, whoa, wait. So I had some people who were surprised. But in the long term, people appreciate it. As I said, the right people will appreciate it.
Okay, I've seen departments working in silos and the heads pushing their interest before organization. How would one manage when one is not in a leadership position?
Depends what are you trying to do. If are you asked to be leading a project? If you're asked to be leading a project, I don't want you to go out there and disrupt companies. I'm very easy going towards that strategy. Like that's my type. But if it's not impacting your work, then there is nothing that you will need to do about it. If it is impacting your work, informal leadership is what helped me go through those difficulties, because they might have their own task within, let's say, one department, but I have friends everywhere in the company. Might not be all my friends, but I have the right people and the right link and network. Build that informal network, because it will help you if you work in projects you are being asked to maybe ask somebody in another department to do something for you, and you can't just get it done. And relationship takes time to build, but invest that time since you step foot in that company.
Yeah. I'm going to take one last one. This is from Archana. She's talking about, can you touch upon ways to perform non-financial effectiveness measurement of a project? Ultimately, any upper management will focus on results and deliverables, but not all project yield financial benefits.
Actually, that's a very good pointing out, because most of my projects are very quality. I work in services, and it's very quality oriented in terms of improvement, instead of just showing numbers. So depends on which company you work, but in my company it is okay to work on something that might not be having a number in there, but at the same time, if I show to them how that will impact the number, then they can translate. You need to translate into their language. So if they're saying my SQI is deliver on time, well, do you want a happy customer or do you want the money? So if they say, if you tell me, then you don't mind about this SQI, then you designed it. So do you want me to keep it on track or not? Let the decision up to them. See what they come up with, because if you ask it that way, I don't think they'll say, no, it's okay to not be on time delivery. So show it, but leave the decision to them. You show the facts. You try to show the facts, try to link it to the organizational goal. Learn the organizational goal, which sometimes it's hard because depending on what level of hierarchy you're in, depending how much the company wants to share with you and how well they do that sharing, which they don't do all the time. But try to learn, use this informal link to understand where is the company heading, what's the strategy, long-term strategy, and see what are the facts that could impact that, and translate into that language, and see if they have feedback on that. You do need those sponsor buy-ins. You can't just take your project and work on it.
Okay, I think we're actually past 4 minutes the time. So thank you everyone for still staying on board, and thank you for all the questions that you have raised. Before I explain how you get credit for tonight's webinar, I would like to thank you, our speaker, Sidita, as well as our organizers who are in the background supporting us and help with the webinar. Today's presentation and recording of the webinar will be posted on our website and YouTube channel within 48 hours. I know a few of people have sent me a message and I did reply to them. It will be available in a couple days. Our next webinar will be on August 22nd, and our speaker is actually me, Karen, and the topic we'll be working through is managing time for maximum results. So very much aligned further to what we're doing today, where the timing is very critical to make the execution and implementation process. So how to manage your time for maximum results. Registration can be done on our website by viewing our calendar, www.asqhdnl.org. To get automatic notification about future webinars, you can follow our LinkedIn page or sign up for a newsletter through our webinar. The follow-up email includes information how to find us there. And we would highly appreciate that if you can fill a 1-minute survey, which it will pop on your screen as soon as you close the webinar. For those who are attending over the phone, call only. You will receive a follow-up email within an hour, and that will include the survey link as well as upcoming webinar information. The survey allows us to improve the quality of upcoming webinars and better meet your needs in future. For those of you who attended at least 40 minutes, you will receive a separate email in addition to the follow-up email within 24 business hours notifying you that you're getting a 0.1 continuous education credit, which you can then save and take it to ASQ as to prove the claim of your credits. Again, thank you very much, and we look forward to see you next month on August 27. Thank you.